From the latest on Caribbean cruises to kosher safaris, pilgrimages to Jewish Eastern Europe, and award-winning wines and international cuisine in sun-drenched Tel Aviv. Sit back and enjoy the trip with the travel edition of the Jerusalem Post podcast. Way back when Mark and I were kids, there was an ad on British TV. I can't even remember what it was for, which shows how poor an ad it was, but it was about the man who can. We're in, possibly, in terms of human creation, the most remarkable place I have been in my life. And just 20 metres away is the man who could.
For those of you that listened to our first podcast on the Silk Road, David and I were in Tashkent and in Bukhara. For the start of this podcast, we are still in Bukhara, but it is night time at the Grand Mosque and the Grand Tower. We have come here at 8 o'clock, and as we were walking here, it was dark. Our friend Munir, who has been our guide, made a phone call, and all of a sudden, the lights on probably the most important landmark in Bukhara are suddenly switched on to the most amazing scene. The colours, just unbelievable. David?
In front of us is the madrasa, which is the Muslim equivalent of the Jewish yeshiva or place of learning. The centre is lit up orange. The gateway into this centre of scholastic learning is huge. It is full of mosaics, of tiles, of inscriptions, magnificent, leading up into the dark sky. On either side of it are two minarets. They are tall, they are turquoise, they are truly magnificent. Behind us, which is known, as Mark said, as the Grand Mosque or the Masjid Kalon, is also lit up in orange. And for those of you who listened in the last podcast, you'll know that 48 metres above our heads is a tower where the muazzin would call people to prayer that dates back just shy of 900 years. And all of it is lit for us, and we are the only people in the square.
Apart from the poor man who's just wheeled his bicycle by because he needs to switch on the lights on the tower. As I said, if you haven't listened to our previous podcast on the Silk Road, starting in Tashkent and in Bukhara, I recommend that you go back to episode 49 and have a listen. For today's episode, we will finish off in Bukhara. Oh my gosh, the lights have come on. Wow.
So the one place that hadn't been lit, and we were waiting, it's freezing cold, we really are the only people in the square. The one thing that hadn't come on were the lights on the tower, and we've described everything else, the oranges and the turquoise and the pinks that are here. And now, above it all, 48 metres up, a tower, the Kalon Tower, is lit up in a beautiful white.
As I said, when we leave Bukhara in the morning on the bullet train, we are going to Samarkand, where we will take in even more amazing architecture, even more Jewish history, even more Islamic history, and hopefully a little more food.
We just want to say a quick farewell to our wonderful guide, Munir, who has done so much with us, who's taken us to see the most magnificent scenes that you will potentially ever see, certainly in the Islamic world. This is truly the heart of learning, of education, of history in Central Asia. Munir, one thing that you would like visitors to know about your beautiful city if they're thinking about booking their next vacation?
First of all, I would like to say thank you. It was a very wonderful trip. I am very glad to assist your trip in Bukhara. We all Bukharians welcome you to come Bukhara. Enjoy our culture, heritage and food. Thank you very much.
I want to add to that the incredible hospitality, the smile on everybody's face. You see the hearts shining through here.
Maybe apart from the man with the bicycle who's just had to come back and put the lights on for us. Question time. Samarkand and Tashkent means the same thing. True or false?
The answers at the end of this pod. We're off to our hotel for a quick sleep. Then we're on a train at 4:20 tomorrow morning to bring you all about Samarkand. Sleep well, folks.
This is the Jerusalem Post Podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com. Morning, David.
Good morning, Mark. Did you sleep?
Twice. Fitful. Like, I woke up in the middle and did what most people do when they wake up in the middle of the night. I got on a bullet train from Bukhara to Samarkand.
4 a.m. We were at the train station. It was minus a lot. It was cold.
Yes.
The train was amazing. The service of coffee on the train, we paid for it, but the glass that it came in, the latte.
It was like being at Starbucks.
No, come on. It was very good quality.
By the way, if you're out there, Starbucks, and you want to sponsor the programme, it was just like Starbucks.
No, it was a terrific journey with, at the front of our carriage, a woman in beautiful uniform, replete with a hat on a jaunty angle.
Yes, it was a really smart uniform. And at the other end of the carriage, the man with another smart uniform with a big flat peak cap and with the writing, I think, of Uzbek Railways.
We were brought into the train station through the VIP lounge. It was superb. It was all marble. There was a Christmas tree. Also in our hotel, they're playing Christmas music, so you can tell when we're recording this podcast. We're in a country where 95% plus of the people are Muslim, and yet here you are with Christmas music, with the trees. It was really nice to see the respect for other faiths.
We're in Samarkand. You're going to hear a little bit more of us in Samarkand. We have a wonderful guide with us. He is a historian. He knows everything, and he talks very, very quickly, and he's a little bit shy. But hopefully he will instill us with enough knowledge to pass on what we're seeing while we walk around. We are at Amir Timur's mausoleum, our first stop today.
Amir Timur is the founding father of this nation. He is the person that all of Uzbekistan looks to. His statue is in all of the cities. His presence is felt to this day as being somebody who brought disparate peoples together, who ended quite a lot of strife, and if I remember rightly from some of the history that I have read, also very welcoming of Jewish people in this part of the world.
Amir Timur came around a century after Genghis Khan, and his figure, his statue is all over the country, but Samarkand particularly is very closely linked with him. Obviously, his mausoleum, he is buried here.
You may be aware of mausoleums such as that of Napoleon in Paris, but this is from a completely different world. Imagine the Arabian Nights. Just think of what a palace would have looked like in your mind's eye, and that is where we are now. There are minarets, the mosaics with scripture from the Quran written in Persian, written in Arabic, the intricate flower decorations. Remember, here you're not going to see the decorations of people or of animals, so it's much more intricate patterns, just as we have in Judaism.
Samarkand is a city known for its scientists, its mathematics, and every symbol here, there is a number. There are 4 pointed stars, 5 pointed stars. What we learned in the last few minutes as we've been walking around the mausoleum is around the colours. A lot of what we've seen in Uzbekistan is blues, whites, oranges, greens. The mosaics all have a very similar colour. The minarets are all blue. And Shokat, our guide, has explained what these colours mean. The blue is the sky, the green is for Islam, the white is for life, and the orange was for, what was it, David? Earth?
Could be, but it's beautiful. On top of that are the numbers. Numbers figure richly through, as we know, Judaism, but also in Islam. And I'm sure Mark was paying much more attention than I as we heard the number 6, the number 8, the number 12.
Bingo.
Mentioned. Thank you very much indeed. But each of these, for example, the idea of a 6-pointed star here is not to do with the Star of David that we know in Judaism, but rather it symbolizes strength. And on the minaret, you have the word Allah, which is God in Arabic, 6 times, which is also representing that symbol of strength.
And as you can see as you walk round, I think we may have said it in Bukhara, it's a bit like the kotel. There are layers and layers and layers. At the back we saw a drinking area where Amir Timur and his armies would drink pomegranate juice in its original format, with the little cup holder areas at the side, all the way round to 21st century blue and beige brick walls, and there are layers throughout here at the side of the building. You can see some of the original 15th century brickwork. Some of the tiles have been restored. It's like accumulation of 500-600 years of architectural work and restoration. It's so beautiful.
You're getting very good at all of this descriptive stuff, aren't you?
I know, but I'll be done now. If we see something else beautiful, I think I'm finished.
Well, remember when we first started doing this podcast, the two of us didn't know how to describe an arch.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, didn't know what a column was, and suddenly here we are, at least repeating the words of our guide and trying to explain what is an absolutely phenomenal monument to Amir Timur.
And I think it's something about being here in Uzbekistan, the beauty of what's around you. It really brings out questions and your imagination and wanting to find the answers. Why is this blue? Why are there 6 points? We are now inside the mausoleum, along with a large number of other visitors. This, I think, is the central focal point of this site. Our guide, Shukrat, has taken us around and explained the layout of the mausoleum. There are a number of gravestones within the mausoleum, and as you look up 25-30 meters, ornate inscriptions anywhere from the Quran in Arabic, in various forms of Arabic, the name of Muhammad written in every corner in various shapes.
And various numbers as well. As we said a little bit earlier, there's all that symbolism going on. Also written here are the names of Moses, Jesus, and other biblical characters from the Old and New Testaments. Everything, as Mark said, is so ornate. There are 2 domes. There's the outer dome that you can see from all around, which is a blue, and then there is a gap between it and the inner dome, which is gold. On the inside, beautiful, intricate patterns of gold, and then further down there are the blues again and the greens. Even the onyx, which was brought in from Iran, is of 3 colours and specifically chosen: the green, the white and the orange. And now we know that the orange is for love, for partnership.
The mausoleum is a central focal point of the history of Samarkand, and invaders to Samarkand have come here regularly and attacked the mausoleum, and it has been restored a number of times. Shukrat took us to a corner of the mausoleum where there is a paper mache fresco. It's probably around a metre of the whole mausoleum, which is in the original paper mache. Everything else has been beautifully restored. He has then explained the layout of the gravestones. As Shukrat has told us, the mausoleum was started by Amir Timur for his son Muhammad Sultan, who passed away, I think, 2 to 3 years beforehand. Amir Timur passed away during the construction, and then I think it's his grandson Ulubek that continued the work.
It sounds as though there were several members of the family at different points who did that. We'll hear more about Ulubek later.
The layout has Amir Timur in the middle. It's not the largest gravestone, but it is the central gravestone. Above where effectively his head would be is a larger gravestone, that of his teacher. And to show respect to his teacher, he brought his teacher here. To his right is the gravestone of his son, Muhammad Sultan, and at his feet is the gravestone of Ulubek. Interestingly, behind us, as we turn round, is another gravestone. And above that gravestone, there's like a large piece of wood and some horsehair hanging down. David, what's that?
It almost looks, if you'll forgive the comparison, it looks like a gallows. It is, as a guess, about 4 meters. So what's that in yards? That's about 5 yards high.
Yeah.
And then just a little bit of horsehair. It looks like it's from one particular horse. And below it directly is, as Mark said, a grave. This is the grave of a second teacher of Emir Timur. And to show the respect for him, the horsehair is symbolic of sainthood.
I think we've come to the pinnacle, the peak of our trip. When you look at the guidebooks for Uzbekistan and Samarkand, the symbols of Samarkand are here in Registan Square.
We're surrounded on three sides by madrasas. If you've been listening to all of our podcasting so far from Uzbekistan, you will know that a madrasa is a house of learning, very similar to a bet midrash in Hebrew or a yeshiva, where Jewish people learn, but here it was a university for learning not only Islamic texts, but also
science and mathematics, astronomy. There are three madrasas here, as David said. The original madrasa to my left, as I'm standing facing the pinnacle of the square, is the Ulubek madrasa, a 15th century construction. Then to my right, the other large madrasa is the first Bahadur madrasa. After that, he built pretty much at the same time a second smaller madrasa, which is known as the Bahadur II madrasa. There's probably a better name for it.
So in the Ulubek madrasa, if I remember rightly, there are 52 classrooms with 4 lecture rooms, one in each corner. That means that there were hundreds of students here at any given time learning texts in what I guess we would talk about as late medieval period for Europe?
Yes, there are so many mosaics and inscriptions on all of the building. Perhaps the most interesting one is on the Bahadur one, the larger Bahadur madrasa. To my right, there are 2 tigers. On the tiger's back, there is a face and the sun, and the tiger is following a deer, and both deers are going towards an 8-sided star. Just to try and summarize my understanding of that, the sun is knowledge. As we've said here, Samarkand, the center of knowledge. The tiger is the governor. It relates to strength and the governance of the region. The deer it's following is life, and then in the center is the 8-pointed star, relates to Eden. What it's saying is knowledge is the gateway to Eden, the gateway to heaven. Without knowledge, you won't make it to heaven.
And here was me thinking that you were going to be talking about what was underneath, which again, as those of you who are familiar with Hindu tradition, what we call in the modern period the swastika or the swastika, they have something very similar to that under 2 of the madrasas, under the main arches. And according to Islamic tradition, they are made up of lots of alifs and lambs. Those are the first 2 letters that make up the word Allah. And if you put them next to each other going round and round in, concentric lines, it ends up looking exactly like a swastika.
2 things to note here. One, if you stand here, compared to, say, Bukhara, the buildings are more imperfect. You see the slant of the towers. They're less, I'd say, restored, more natural. The journey of time has affected them more. It feels a little bit more original than Bukhara. Actually, these are newer buildings, but I think the elements have been less kind to them. The other thing here, this is a great place for pictures. We've had pictures with brides, we've had pictures with a man from Turkmenistan national dress, to Russian women wearing Uzbek dress, all walking around in the most beautiful outfits. And you just sneak in and ruin their selfies.
What I would say is it's far more at the moment, and it's not fair to judge because we're recording this the first week of December, so I don't know what it's like the rest of the year, but there are far more tourists here, whereas our experience over in Bukhara was that we had the square pretty much to ourselves.
You know how it is. You go out for lunch and then next to you is one of the most famous musicians in Uzbekistan.
Yes, and this, it seems, has not been arranged, even though these famous podcasters and writers from Israel are in town.
Abdul Hoshim Ismailov appears regularly with the president on a Friday, and he's having dinner next to us. And our guide, Shukrat, has managed to convince him to give us a tune.
It's really interesting. He's having a teaching lesson with one of his students over lunch, which is a great way to do it. So lunch has already been very musical, but they've agreed to do this. You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition with Mark Gordon and David Harris.
After a lot of chasing around, we are lucky to be sat with Mr. Abdu Hosim Ismailov, who is one of the most famous musicians in Uzbekistan. Mr. Ismailov, we are producing a podcast about tourism. Can you tell us something about the musical culture of Uzbekistan? And if someone was coming to visit Uzbekistan, what would they listen to here?
Art doesn't choose a nation. Art brings people and nations together.
سبب bu آهنگ.
The reason is that the melody has such a charm. We know that art has no language.
Çargah.
This is called chargah. Chargah comes from the Persian language. Char means four, goh means place. Chargah means four place in English.
قدم را رنجی سوی ما اسیران میکنی یعنی آب مشتاقان جمالی خود نمایان میکنی یعنی bu improvizasyon.
This is the makam. In Azerbaijan, they call it mugam. Indians call it raga.
Bizim makamımızda oldin baxshichilik paydo bo'lgan. Baxshilar.
Bakshi appeared before our makam. Bakshi is an art form that's coming from the distant past. Then makam appeared. Makam is always performed professionally. Every country has its own music, but the makam music is ours. It's very beautiful. We know that there are 7 joints in human being. There are 7 notes. All of those was created for the human. That's why everyone enjoys the melody. Melody cleanses a person's soul. It's a real, pure art. The real art that makes a person focus on one point, it is melody. When a person stares and vibrates while listening to music, one gets fascinated, that's called real art.
I'm delighted that I'm with Sophie Ibbotson, who is the tourism ambassador to the United Kingdom for Uzbekistan. Have I got that right?
Yes, that's correct.
At least I've got that right. Now, the dress that you are wearing. First of all, should I be describing this as a dress? Because it looks like a Japanese kimono.
So it's somewhere between a coat and a dress. It's a wraparound dress. And it's inspired by the traditional chapan, which is the coats of Uzbekistan. And it's made from a fabric called ikat, which is a woven fabric where you dye the threads before you make it. So the pattern comes from the dyeing, not from taking different coloured threads and dyeing together. This particular example was made in Bukhara, which is one of the Silk Road cities of Uzbekistan, just a couple of weeks ago by a friend of mine called Mijgona. I said to her that I wanted something spectacular to wear, and she came up to this wonderful outfit, which is, I know you can't see it on the podcast, but hot pink, purple, orange and red.
I'm so glad you did that, because I was just about to put the male gender down and say we don't do colours, what are they? How much is there a push to get Uzbekistan's name out there in the world of travel and tourism?
So tourism is probably the most important sector right now for Uzbekistan in terms of investment and in terms of promotion. When President Mirziyoyev came to power, he said that he had two priorities for his presidency. One was international investment and the other was tourism. So the commitment to developing and promoting tourism comes from the very top of government, but it's something that's shared all across the country by the public and by private sector.
You're from the UK, it's thousands of miles away. Many of our listeners are in the United States, the west coast of the United States. I mean, really long journey, not always direct flights, although I have to say Uzbekistan Airways is phenomenal. Why should someone make the trek to this country?
The top reason that people come here is for the Great Silk Road cities. So there are 5 UNESCO World Heritage Sites in Uzbekistan, 4 of which are cultural sites. So many people have heard of Samarkand, of Bukhara, Khiva, but they don't realise that those cities are in Uzbekistan. So if you want to experience the highlights of the Silk Road, this is the place to come. There are lots of other things that Uzbekistan has to offer, however, and one of which is developing very fast is adventure tourism, and particularly winter sports tourism. People are quite surprised about that. They think about Uzbekistan being a hot country and being a desert. But in fact, in the Chanshan Mountains, which are also a UNESCO World Heritage Site, albeit a natural one, there is some of the world's best powder and increasing infrastructure for winter sports.
The United Nations World Tourism Organization is really investing itself in Uzbekistan. Tell us a little bit about that relationship.
So the UNWTO is the world's leading sector for tourism, and it brings together not only the ministries of tourism, the policymakers, but also the private sector and everybody else working in the tourism space. At Madrid, at the General Assembly last year, it was decided that the next UNWTO General Assembly will be in Samarkand, and it's the first time that this event has been hosted in Central Asia. It's a real coup for Uzbekistan, and particularly to have it in Samarkand, which is a city which has been hosting international travellers for millennia.
I wish you much luck in your important role in promoting this. It certainly sounds like the UN has taken note. Hopefully our listeners will as well. Sophie Ibbotson, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Uzbekistan Fact File. Tashkent can be reached with Uzbekistan Airways from New York, London, Tel Aviv, Dubai, Frankfurt and Istanbul. Fly Dubai and Wizz Air Abu Dhabi fly to both Tashkent and Samarkand's new airport operated by Air Marakanda. Turkish Airlines flies from Istanbul to Tashkent, Samarkand and Bukhara. Samarkand, Bukhara and Tashkent are linked by the high-speed Afrosiyab rail line. Tashkent has a metro system with 4 lines. Tickets cost around 1400 som or 12 cents. Taxis in Bukhara and Samarkand are inexpensive and will cost less than $1 for a short ride. In Tashkent, there's a Hilton, Hyatt Regency, Wyndham and Courtyard by Marriott. In Bukhara, there are a few 4-star hotels, the Sahid Zarafshan, Turan City Plaza and Dera. In Samarkand, the Silk Road tourist complex has a number of high-quality hotels. The Regency Amir Timur, Silk Road by Minyun, Savitsky Plaza and 2 wellness hotels, Sogd and Afrosiyab. In the city, the pick are the Continental and the Shakhoda Elite. The currency is the Uzbek som. $1 equals 11,300 som as of December 2022. There is a Jewish restaurant called Shalom in Tashkent. Bet Chabad in Tashkent offers catering services. Call while you're there 050 283 7352. Meat is the star of the menu in Uzbekistan. Use the Happy Cow app to find vegetarian restaurants.
You'll never believe it, David.
Believe what?
Apparently, one of the biblical prophets is buried in Samarkand.
I do believe it. Well, so here's the interesting question. When, for example, in northern Israel, you're taken to the graves of rabbis or the grave of historic figures, was the person actually buried there or not? Now that, of course, does not affect the faith of those who are going to say prayers to God and using to some extent the power, the believed holiness of those individuals, whether there or not, to allow their prayers to be received. And I think we could probably say the same here.
Yeah. Here in Samarkand, the legend is that Amir Timur, in the 15th century, went to Shusha and brought back the remains of Daniel the prophet.
Okay, so Daniel lived
in the lion's den.
Partly 7th, 6th century before the Common Era.
In the court of Nebuchadnezzar?
The second.
Or was it Darius?
He was brought over as an exile from Israel during the period of Nebuchadnezzar II, and then continued to live there during the period afterwards. Darius and Cyrus.
Legend has it that Daniel was a very, very pious man, would pray every day, and there was a decree at the time in the court of Darius, I believe, that there should be no further prayers. But Daniel continued to pray, and as his punishment, he was put in the lion's den.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
Or legend.
And the question is, where was he actually buried? There are 4 potential places: in Iran, in Iraq, and here in Uzbekistan.
That's 3. You forgot Morocco.
There you go. That's why you're the accountant.
Thank you.
The tomb of Daniel here is quite remarkable. It's perched up on a hill which is replete with archaeological excavations of Zoroastrian areas. There are 7 layers in the tell or mound that is here. The tomb itself is 18 metres long. That's, in yards at least, about 20 yards long.
Roughly, yeah.
As we said, 18 metres, for those of you who understand Hebrew gematria terms or numeric values of numbers, is chai, 18, which means life.
Only if you're doing it in metric. If you're doing it in yards. The noise you can hear in the background is there is a holy water spring, and people are coming every day bringing plastic bottles and filling up for a taste of the very, very sweet holy water.
You say that. The gentleman next to me has actually got a cement-making bucket,
yes,
which probably holds about 6 days of rainwater and filling it up. Hi, this is David Harris from the Jerusalem Post podcast Travel Edition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at MarkDavidPod, or mail us at markdavidpod@gmail.com. As a small child, many centuries ago, I was fascinated by the stars. We lived very close to Jodrell Bank, which is one of the world's most famous radio telescopes. And every summer I would say to my parents, we have to go again and we have to go again. And my parents would always say, we've been. These days I've got a nice telescope at home, but I don't use it because I'm just lazy.
For those of us that have ever seen David and I record, in the background when we record is that telescope.
The reason I've gone off on one, talking about something completely unrelated, is because we've come to what for me is one of the highlights of our trip to Uzbekistan.
Food?
We're going back, how many years now? 600 years.
Early 15th century.
Right. And the grandson of Amir Timur, by the name of
Ulubeg.
What about the rest of his name?
Mr. Ulubeg.
He was not only a scholar of Quranic and Islamic texts, he was a scientist, and he was also, most importantly for now, an astronomer. He built a telescope like no other that you would probably see anywhere else.
Sadly, like most things in Samarkand, the Russians came at various points and destroyed it. But in 1908, at the end of the Russian Empire, Mirza Ulubeg's observatory was rediscovered.
By a Russian?
Yes, who loved it so much he asked to be buried here.
And he is indeed buried just nearby. There was also a madrasa around here, a very large madrasa, where people learnt for 2 years Quranic texts and then would stay for a further 6 to 10 years learning about history, science and the stars. And what does remain of this whole area is, how do you describe it for an audio audience?
It's almost like a roller coaster. It's essentially the underground mechanics of a telescope, but a telescope from the 15th century. And what you can't see is the building above with the aperture that brings in the images of the planets. but you've got the workings underneath where Ulubeg would have walked up and down and looked at the pictures of the planets on this roller coaster.
It is huge. It takes up maybe a third the size of a football field.
At least.
It's an incredible piece. It's remarkable. And again, if you would like to see pictures and maybe a little bit of video at some point, then look for our social media at MarkDavidPod.
We are now in the Bet Knesset in Samarkand. It's only a few hours before Shabbat. We've rushed here and we're very lucky to be joined by the leader of the community who has agreed to an interview. Thank you very much for inviting us. Could you introduce yourself to our listeners?
I am Tilayev Yosef. I am the rabbi. I am the host of this place, the owner of this place.
Tilayev Yosef.
How old is this synagogue? Can you tell us how many people used to belong to the community and how many people come to the community now?
This particular synagogue was opened in 1891. There were, in the heyday, 35,000 Jews in Samarkand. These days, probably we see about 100.
As we were walking, Rabbi, you mentioned that there were people that came to the community after the war, so that not everybody here is originally from Samarkand. There were also people that came from Europe.
The presence here of Bukharan Jews dates back to 2,000 years. That's roughly when they got to this part of the world, bringing us forward to the more modern times. In the 1940s, during the war, Polish people fleeing what was happening in Europe came here.
Do you think that the community is now stable and that there are young families and the community will stay? Or do you see over the next 20 years the community will see more people leave to Israel and to America?
50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, people were going to Israel. Today, this is only an older community. People who were in their 80s, in the 70s. I'm the baby of the community. I'm 73 years old.
The synagogue is beautiful. In a small community like this, how do you keep the synagogue looking this well maintained?
We're very lucky that when tourists come, they make a donation, and that helps us cover our basic water, electricity, and other utilities.
There were some interesting pictures outside of rabbis, of people from the community. I saw a picture of the grandfather of a famous chef known as Aharoni, and there was a picture on the door of the founder of the community. When is the synagogue open for tourists to visit?
It's very simple. Tourists are very welcome to come. All they need to do is come to the synagogue, look on the door. There's a phone number. Call me and I'll be over in a couple of minutes.
The number is also available on the internet. Rabbi, toda rabba. V'shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
You're listening to the Jerusalem Post podcast travel edition. We've now come into an incredible complex that dates back hundreds of years. It's called Shahid Zinda, which means the living martyr. The particular mausoleum that we are in at the moment, it's one after another of mausoleums, including several of the sisters of Amir Timur who are buried here. In this particular mausoleum where we are now, there are several depictions of the Garden of Eden. Again, this is a shared idea between the monotheistic faiths. The idea being that you live on after your passing. People come from all over the world to pay their respects and to see the magnificent architecture. But before this, we did several other things that we should be telling you about.
When we left the synagogue, we quickly popped to the other end of the complex where there was a second synagogue that belonged to the Ashkenazim in the community, those people that fled during the World War II era, mainly from Poland and Lithuania, and there's still an active Ashkenazi synagogue there. As we crossed the road, there was a sign that said hammam davodi, and that we thought translated as something like a hammam, which was quite strange to find that not so strange to find in the middle of the area, but it seems to be part of the synagogue complex. So the rabbi took us into the complex. There was an old Volga car parked in the car park with all its tyres down because it probably hasn't been driven since World War II. And then there is a whole active hammam going on, like 4 or 5 underground rooms, baths, everything, run by the synagogue.
And as we've said on previous podcasts, if you want to see pictures of the synagogue, of the hammam, of the other places that we've been, you can do that through social media at Mark David Pod. From there, we walked with our wonderful guide to the bazaar.
Shukrat finally took us to somewhere for me to buy fridge magnets. My ambition is fulfilled, another space on the fridge taker, but it's a busy, active market used by locals, full of produce, full of clothing, spices. The smells were amazing, the colours fabulous, and the people serving behind the counters. You have people from all over Uzbekistan, all types of nationality or sub-nationality working there. It really is a sight to behold.
As Shukrat has said to us several times, there are 130 different ethnicities in this country, and you see it and you feel it all the way from European to East Asian and many between. There are numerous denominations, confessions here as well. It truly is what it claims to be, a crossroads on the Silk Road and a meeting point for East and West.
Kevin Costner said in Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come.
As we left the centre of Samarkand, we travelled maybe a couple of miles into an open, very flat area. To our right, brand new buildings, clearly for offices, for businesses. To the left, new plans for agriculture, moving maybe a little bit away from traditional rice growing.
But as you drive closer, you realise this is so much more than an industrial complex. This is hopefully the future of tourism in Samarkand. In September 2022, the country hosted the Shanghai Cooperation meeting. 15 countries came. There were hotels built for the meeting, conference centre. But behind all of that, there is what they call the Great Silk Road Tourism Complex.
We've come into, I want to call it a Disneyland, but that really doesn't do it justice. There are no rides here. There are no loud noises. This is a very genteel use of traditional Uzbek architecture, the domes, the minarets that we've been talking about, but bringing within those structures the crafts that we've seen throughout this country during our visit.
To enhance that and to enhance the crafts, there are restaurants here, bakeries. We walked up to a bakery where we saw them making the traditional bread here, the naan, and what looks like a samosa to some extent, a bareka, what they call the somza here. Really delicious meat-filled pastries.
And if I dare look up at Mark's gorgeous face,
hello, gorgeous.
His grey or white hair atop is now invisible to the eye because he's bought a traditional Uzbek, very multicoloured hat.
Kippa, I like to call it.
It looks like a dome, and it absolutely blends in with the incredible designs on the building behind us. And on these very steps where we are now, just 4 months ago, the leaders of 15 countries gathered for their traditional photograph. In addition to the Shanghai meeting, since then, leaders from what they're calling the sort of Turkic group of nations have also met in this part of the world. So Samarkand is becoming a centre of political thought, a centre of cultural development, and a centre of tourism, marking the very heart of the Silk Road.
We're near the end of our trip now, and we're at Samarkand's brand new international airport, and you can see again it's been built with the growth of tourism in Samarkand in mind. Maria Sharavina is the Deputy General Director for Corporate Communications, who is going to tell us a little bit more about the airport.
What I'm proud of that this building is not just a modern building with some modern stuff in it. It is the respect to the history of Samarkand region, because it is built like the open book of great scientist Mirza Ulugh. The bonus for those who have flights from and to our airport at night, we have enlightening constellations on the rooftop. Really amazing view.
The airport recently opened. Can you tell us how long it took to build and about the process of opening the airport and replacing the old Samarkand airport?
So Air Marakanda is the managing company of this airport. Our company was established in 2020. This terminal was opened on the 18th of March 2022, less than 1 year. It's absolutely brand new.
The old airport, if I remember rightly, could handle about 450,000 people per year. Where are you at with capacity here, and what are your future plans?
This terminal can serve more than 2 million passengers, and before old terminal could serve only 40 flights a week, we can operate more than 120 flights a week. And our commercial department, they're working on route development from to Samarkand airport, because we understand that Samarkand has huge tourism potential, and also we have a lot of religious places to visit, and we understand for religious tourism it's also very interesting place to be, and also for business trips, because now the country is open, and we understand there can be interest from different parts of business, and they can invest their money to Samarkand region, because it's really now developing very quickly.
I'm looking at the departure board at the moment. It's a mix of flights around Uzbekistan, quite a number of flights to and from Russia. But what I can also see is there's Istanbul and Dubai, both excellent hubs for people flying from Israel and beyond, all around the world. What are the plans for future routes?
Of course, we want to expand all over the world. To Middle East, and also to Europe, and to South and North America, of course, to the USA and Israel, of course. But we understand that the closest plans, which we are waiting just till the end of this year, till the end of December, it's going to be Abu Dhabi opening new flights by Wizz Air Abu Dhabi. We are waiting for the new certificate of Transport Security Association certificate. I hope we'll get it next year, and then we will be able to open the flight program to USA, Israel, Great Britain, and Canada, because they have very big restrictions for the security level. So we want to get this certificate to be more open for the airlines.
So Wizz Air Abu Dhabi, which is another great hub out of Israel, there are very easy flights to Abu Dhabi, so this will help expand the access for people coming from Israel.
About 2 months ago, we opened the direct flight to Dubai by Fly Dubai Airline. And what I want to say that first it was 3 flights a week they established, but in a month they doubled this number, and we had 6 months a week. And tomorrow they will announce that from the next week they will have 7 flights a week. So every day flight to Dubai, because they see that the passenger traffic is very good on this destination, and we have a lot of passengers who want to get to Dubai and from Dubai to here.
You're the last person that we're going to be interviewing during our trip to this beautiful country. You're someone who was born here but grew up and worked elsewhere in Russia, and you've come back here. You're the person who gets to give the final message to our listeners who are in Israel, in North America, and around the world. What would you like them to take away from everything they've heard about Uzbekistan and Samarkand?
I will tell my experience, what I'm inspired with, because before I was a little scary, like, what am I doing? I'm gonna visit and work for a different country I've never been to before my childhood. And what I like, it's the people. They're so friendly, open-hearted and open-minded. It doesn't matter about the nation, about how you look like, and so on, about your tradition and so on. They respect to everything, to all the nations, and they also respectful for the guests of the country and the Samarkand region. And also I love the sunny weather. The food is amazing, really. I eat here, maybe you tried it, the osh. It's traditional rice and meat dish. I love it, really. I'm always asking my colleagues to eat osh or plov, we call it in Russian osh, and 3-4 times a week. I'm asking like, please, let's go to eat it. And they're like, aren't you full up with it? No, I love it. I love it. This taste, it's amazing. And also what I love, it's rather cheap here. And the weather, again, it's very comfortable. The spring is amazing time. All the trees are covered with the flowers. It's amazing to see the fresh air. And around Samarkand, there are a lot of mountains to visit. It's very amazing. Also, we had trekking there with my colleagues. It's very nice. A lot of waterfalls and some, wild horses and sheep. And also, I like the prices, of course. Really, it's very good for the tourists. I think all over the world it's very good and the service is starting being better and better and better. The locals, they understand that the service is really important for the foreigners who come, so they're increasing the level of their service.
Maria Sharavina from Air Maracanda, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to meet you here in Samarkand International Airport.
Rahmat.
So, Mark, it's time to go back to our homes, to our families, and you must be excited about that.
Of course I'm excited. I mean, this has
There
been...
was a big hesitation there.
Which you're going to edit out.
Maybe not.
No, I'm just really, really tired. This has been a very, very heavy schedule. No one will have any sympathy for us. But we have been working 18 hours a day so we could get in as much as we could of this beautiful country.
It's stunning. I've been able to see sort of 2.5 cities. Mark only saw Tashkent when it was very, very dark.
2.1 cities.
Yeah. Tashkent, the fair was phenomenal. It was a real eye-opener. Some of the folks from both Uzbekistan itself and the surrounding countries in the craft area were so warm, so friendly, and again you can see much of that in our social media at Mark David Pod. And then of course we went to the two historic cities of Bukhara and Samarkand.
And I think the warmth is something that we felt throughout. People here have been very friendly, they smile at you. I love the thing of touching your heart and saying thank you. It's just such a friendly country.
Strangers, you walk along the street, say salam alaikum, and they mean it and they give you eye contact. It is a wonderful, wonderful place. And as our last interviewee, Maria, was saying, it truly is a place that welcomes foreigners.
And we have had such outstanding guides while we've been here. Munir in Bukhara, who spoke beautifully on our podcast and is really passionate about his city. We had some wonderful chats with him over meals. He's such a warm human being. And then we had Shukrat and Mohammed, who took us around Samarkand, who were a little bit more shy, so you didn't hear from them. But they are so passionate about this city and telling us everything they knew.
The history, the culture, and about the future of this place too. We also want to say some thank yous for people that you didn't hear from. First and foremost, from Uzbekistan's ambassador to Israel, Faruza Mahmudova, who not only arranged for us to come here, but at every single juncture during this 3-day trip was on the phone, texting, phoning, making sure that we were getting the best treatment possible.
Texting us and texting every single guide we were with to make sure they were looking after us. I don't think we've ever been so warmly looked after. Thank you to Uzbekistan Travel, who have organised this trip, to Uzbekistan Airways, who have given us some very comfortable flights to come here, and Air Maracanda, who run this airport, who have taken us around the airport and shown us what a fabulous facility it is.
Mark, your favourite time in the podcast.
Oh, is someone making me a drink?
Quiz question.
Quiz question. We asked you, did Tashkent and Samarkand mean the same thing? And the answer is yes. For both cities, it means stone town or stone fort. In Samarkand, it's in Sogdian, and in Tashkent, it's in Turkic.
I'm sure everybody knew that.
Yeah, it was a 50-50, so you had a good chance of getting it right.
Folks, time for us to say farewell.
It's been, as David said at the beginning of this trip, one of our lifetime tick list, wish list, bucket list trips. We have to find another one now.
We hope we'll come again soon. To all of you for listening, we say Rahmat, thank you.
Rahmat Katakan.
We hope you'll join us the next time on the podcast. And before we say goodbye, remember, subscribe, share, tell all your friends about it. And you can always mail us, markdavidpod@gmail.com.
Goodbye.
Farewell.